So let us talk about the first format in film, and that is the 135 format or the 35 format, which is basically a film size of 36 by 24 That's something like this. Now, if you're a digital shooter, then you've heard about it. In the digital era, it's called the full frame sensor, right? And that's the same as a 35 film. Now, guess what? In the film era, it used to be called the miniature format or the small format because there were hordes of film sizes and formats which were larger than 35 But of course, we want full frame, right? We're digital shooters. So let's look at what is the 35 format. Here's a camera. This is one of Nikon's best ever cameras, launched in I think 2000 or 2002. This is the Nikon FM3A. It's a 35 film camera and it's manual focus. Now, in the 90s, there were a host of autofocus cameras, but Nikon still launched this one. And this is only manual focus, but it's a beautiful camera. It's one of the best film cameras. And this is a 35 or a full frame camera for that matter, right? Now, here is a variant. This is probably Minolta's best ever autofocus camera. So that was manual focus. This is autofocus. It has a host of functionalities. It was one of the most advanced cameras of its time. And this is again a 35 camera. Now that one had film, this doesn't, so I can show you how it looks inside. So that's where the film goes and it keeps moving frame by frame after each shot. And this one, it moves automatically. In that camera, you have to manually wind it after every frame. So those advancements were there in this camera. And right here in the middle, where you see the shutter, is the size of the film. That's how big the film is, which if you see closely is almost the same as your full frame sensor. So that is 35 film or 135 format, which is 36 by 24 This is a developed roll of 35 film. Now, if I take this out carefully, without smudging the negatives, you'll see this one is actually 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 frames in this. Now this comes as a roll. So there are 36 exposures. And if you load the film carefully in total darkness, you could actually even get away with 37, sometimes even 39 frames from a single roll of 35 film. But typically you get about 36. And once you develop it, as the complete roll, and then you can cut it and put it into these sleeves for safekeeping. But yeah, that's if you really look closely here, you'll see this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames, and then all of these together make up about 36 frames. So that is the 35 format or the 135 film format. Let's talk about the next one, which is a very, very interesting format, which is the medium format. And why do I say it's interesting? Because a medium format is a 6 by 6 or a 6 centimeters by 6 centimeter film size, right? But since it comes as a complete roll, you can actually build cameras, and they did do that. They built cameras which kept the height of the film at 6, but the length could be anything you wanted. So it could be 6 by 6, which is a square. It could be less than that, 6 by 4.5. It could be 6 by 7. It could be 6 by 9. It could be 6 by 17, which is a panoramic, 1:3 kind of aspect ratio. So you could do pretty much anything you wanted with that. So that was pretty interesting. And it's also called the 120 film. And it typically, a 6 by 6 format gave you about 12 exposures, and a 6 by 7 gave you about 9 or 10. And then a panoramic 6 by 17 might give you just 3 or 4. So, it could be used in whichever way you wanted, as long as your camera could accommodate the length of the frame. So this is an example of a medium format camera. This is one of the best medium format cameras ever made, a Rolleiflex. This is the 2.8E. The 2.8F is highly sought after. So let me show you the size. And there you go. Now compare this to full frame. Full frame was probably just a fraction of this, or the 35mm was just a fraction of this. This is 6 centimeters by 6 centimeters, a square format. There are cameras like the Pentax 6x7, which actually went a little longer, so it became a 6x7. Fuji makes a 6x9, and there are other cameras like the Linhof 6x17. So yeah, there's a plethora of cameras catering to the medium format. Now here's the interesting part. Digital medium format today, apart from probably phase 1, nobody really makes anything bigger than a 6 by 4.5, right? So what we know as medium format in a Hasselblad X2D or X1D2 or the Fuji GFX series is actually smaller than even the smallest medium format of the film era. So that's really interesting. I think it's 44 millimeters by 33 millimeters. That's typical medium format in digital. Phase 1, of course, makes slightly larger, but of course, they are so insanely expensive that you'll probably never even get to buying that camera. So here is a sample of medium format film. Now this also comes in a roll, but I have cut each negative separately because if I want to print, it's sometimes easier. And also the sleeve basically is single negative sleeves, so I can only put one frame at a time. And if you see here, 6x6. How do I get this? Okay, here we go. I'll need to be careful to just hold the edge. So that's the size of a 6x6 negative. This is a typical 120 roll. Now this is unexposed. This, I need to take off the tape and then I need to put it in the camera, wind it, and then start shooting. But that's how this looks. Now compared to this, a 35mm might be much smaller, as you can imagine. So this is a roll of 120 film. Okay, now let's get to the most interesting format on film. And personally, I can tell you it's my favorite format. With this format, you can't shoot 10 frames in a day. Well, maybe you could if you push it, but it's like a camera for shooting 1 frame a day or maybe 5 frames in a whole day. This is, ladies and gentlemen, the large format. You can see the size of the camera. It's probably the most simple camera ever made, but it can do so many things that a normal 35mm or a medium format camera cannot do. And we'll get to that in a separate video about large format cameras. But let's see what's special about the large format camera. So we saw earlier that a 35mm film is 24mm by 36mm, a single frame. Similarly, a medium format could be 6 centimeters by 4.5 centimeters or 6 by 6, 6 by 7, 6 by 9, 6 by 17. But this one, the particular one I have here, the size of the negative or size of one frame is 10 inches by 8 inches. Now that's massive, isn't it? 8 inches by 10 inches. That's about, the surface area of that is about 60 times the surface area of a full frame sensor or a 35mm film. And that's the beauty of this. So large format actually doesn't begin at 8 by 10. It begins with 4 by 5, which is 4 inch by 5 inch, and then 5 by 7. And then there could be some other ones. Basically a large format camera, if you build, and most of these are not built en masse, they are specifically built. And they can go up to 24 by 24, which is 2 feet by 2 feet, or even bigger. And there are people who use much bigger and massive sized negatives. So now for this, as you can see, you cannot put a roll through this. So what you get here is something called a sheet film. So the film comes in boxes and is a separate sheet of film. And what do you do with that sheet of film? Let's look at that. So how do you shoot this beast? You need something called a holder. So there's a dark slide here. There is film inside this, so I won't pull it off. So basically you can pull it off, and in complete darkness, you need to insert the sheet of film and shut this dark slide down. And then this is the back of the camera, and then this is a ground glass through which you focus. And remember, there's no mirror inside here, so nothing is inverting the image. So it'll be an upside down image. Left will be right and right will be left. And then once you focus, once you've got your composition together, you insert this. And at that time, the shutter of the lens needs to be shut. Now it's a leaf shutter in the lens. There is no shutter in the camera. So you need to shut that. You need to dial in your aperture and then put this, pull the dark slide off, click the shutter, put the dark slide back, and then pull the whole holder out. And then take it for developing, where you need to pull the negative in complete darkness and then put it in your tray, close it, and then start developing. So it's quite a complicated process, and we'll go through this in detail in another video, and it's one of the most interesting processes. So look forward to doing that video. But that's large format for you. And let's check out the size. So you see the size, it's an 8-inch by 10-inch negative. Compare that to this. What's full frame now? Tiny, right? And that's why this was called the miniature or the small format, because something like this existed. And to build a sensor of this size in today's times would cost a fortune. There is actually a company called LargeSense which manufactures a 4x5 sensor. It's insanely expensive, some $50,000, $60,000 or upward. But it is coming. It is coming. That's the future. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is large format. So let me show you some large format negatives. So this is a 4x5 negative. You see 4 inches by 5 inches, much smaller than this. Actually, 4 of these. It's an 8x10 and this is 4x5. So the surface area is 4 times a 4x5. I used to have a 4x5 Linhof Technica, which I sold, so I can't show you the camera, but these negatives are from that camera. Here is the 8x10 negative. So this is one single sheet which went in the camera, shot and developed. So this is an 8x10 negative. It's this big. And like I said, it's about 60 times the size of full frame or 35mm film. That is large format. So that was film sizes. And we started talking about APS-C and full frame. And then we saw that there used to be, or there still are, such huge film sizes. Now, does that kind of make it a little more interesting? Do you really want to get into film, shoot film in 2024? Check out this video in which we talk about reasons for getting into film in 2024, and you might find something compelling out there. So make sure to check out that video, and see you in the next one.